Hi, and welcome to day 3 of the Portsmouth Institute virtual Easter retreat, Crisis Converted, a Benedictine guide to hope. Today we'll be talking about the third of the 3 Benedictine vows, that of conversion, or in Latin, conversatio morum. In fact, when we take our vows, we tend to take them in Latin because conversatio morum is not easily translated into English. Sometimes it's translated as conversion of way or constant conversion of life. The point is that it balances out the monk's vow of stability. We talked about the strengths of that vow, but there are also some dangers as well. It can often morph into a kind of stagnancy or complacency. Monks are fond of saying things like, "That's the way we've always done it." And while on the one hand, there has always been that sense of the fuga mundi, of fleeing from the world into the desert of contemplation, it can also transform into a retreat from the world into a kind of comfortable isolation. In other words, the Benedict option. But I won't go there tonight. My point is that the only thing worse than being stuck in your house for 2 months with nothing to do is to be stuck in your house for 2 months and to do nothing. Right? The cloister is an opportunity to move beyond what you're comfortable with, to stretch your heart so as to accommodate more of God's grace. I teach sexual ethics to high school juniors. Well, somebody's got to do it. And inevitably, at some point during the term, one of the kids raises his hand and says, "Look, I just want to know how far I can go on a date before it's a sin." And my answer to that question is always the same. I say, "Well, tell me, how slow can I run and still make the track team?" To which, of course, there's no answer. It's an absurd question. Why would you join this track team if you didn't want to run as fast as you could? In the rule of Saint Benedict, Saint Benedict says that a monk should love chastity. But if chastity is just something you want to do by default, then how can you love it? Right? Instead, I say, feel free to do anything that you could brag about to your mother, which is a little bit of a more positive spin on it. Our father, Athanasius, when he teaches sexual ethics, he just walks into the classroom and writes "no" on the chalkboard. Says, "Any questions?" Right? And he's got a point, because, of course, when you have a question, usually it's because you want to know how far you can go without crossing the line. And everybody kind of wants to do this, but that's just not the way a Christian athlete functions. Right? That's acedia. That's trying to do the minimum. I came across an article in McSweeney's, which is sort of Mad Magazine for smart people. I read it anyway. And the article was called "Fragments from the Ancient Gospels of the Church of a Pretty Good God." The authors, whether willingly or unwillingly or unconsciously or consciously, seem to have stumbled on this acedia, this problem of mediocrity, of mediocritizing the Gospels. So I'll read you just a couple of little passages. "Thou shalt keep the 7th day holy," it was written, "and it shall be a day of rest, unless thou hast something important to do, and thou canst not do it any other day." The people agreed. That was very sensible. If you read the Old Testament, the Lord's Day isn't just a day when you try not to do stuff. It's a day devoted to the Lord. And they say this over and over and over again. Here's another passage. "The Lord demanded a sacrifice, so the people gathered to choose an offering. But when each new offering was proposed, they wailed, 'Nay, that is too expensive.' At last they took Yeka's old end table, which was hideously beset with scratches, and matched no other thing in her chambers. And the strongest among them threw it upon a pyre. And the Lord looked down upon the offering and shrugged. And the people shrugged. and there was much shrugging. A kid came up to me not so long ago and said to me, I think I want to be a monk. I'll try to get married first, but if that doesn't work out. And I said, well, Jesus doesn't want your leftovers, and neither do we. The kind of self-gift which elicits a shrug is really unworthy of you and unworthy of God. And here's the last passage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, the Lord said. And the people replied, no other gods? Even that one God with a crocodile head? And the Lord conceded that the God with the crocodile head was hard to compete with. There's so much in our lives that competes for our attention with God. And the vow of conversion is a vow to keep turning away from those things toward God. A vow to focus your attention on the divine, on your purpose. Why did God make you? God made you to know Him, love Him, and serve Him in this world, and to be happy with Him in the next. And anything that distracts you from that is unworthy of Him and unworthy of you. Compare that to this story from the Desert Fathers. A certain monk named Serapion owned nothing but a gospel manuscript, but he only read as far as the words, "Sell what thou hast and give to the poor," because he immediately sold it and gave the money to the poor. If you want an antidote to acedia, if you want to be inspired to convert continuously, to push the limits of your Christian athleticism, my recommendation is to look no further than the Desert Fathers. About the same time that I joined the monastery, my roommate from college decided to become a movie star. And he did. He went off to LA, he married a Sports Illustrated model, he was on sitcoms and Days of Our Lives. Every now and then I would give him a call. We're allowed one phone call a month. Joining the monastery is a lot like prison, except you want to be there. But I remember calling him and him saying, guess who is Teen Magazine's Hunk of the Month? And I said to him, well, I'm in the monastery, so you are? And or he called me and he said, guess who just had dinner with Emmylou Harris? And I remember really, really envying him, thinking, gosh, how much I want to have dinner with her. To this day, I still have no idea who she is, but I really want to have dinner with Emmylou Harris because his life sounded so romantic and so fun. Well, despite my own shortcomings, and the monks voted me, and God bless them, and I ended up taking solemn vows, and the abbot decided to send me off to do my studies. And on the way there, I asked if I could take a layover in New York, where my roommate was now living with his wife. And the abbot, perhaps unwisely, gave me permission to spend 2 days in New York with Scott. And it was awesome. When you're with a movie star, it's awesome. It's beautiful. And we had 2 days that were just like out of a storybook. And on the very last day, Scott decided to have a party for me in his loft on the top of a skyscraper in the meatpacking district, which apparently is very hip. And that night, it was like a scene from the movies. Everyone there was beautiful. The people were beautiful, and the waiters and waitresses were beautiful. And the whole place was full of actors and directors and models and designers. Even the hors d'oeuvres were beautiful. The drinks were beautiful. And I remember sitting on this couch looking out the window over New York, sparkling at night, and having a complete vocation crisis unto myself when this jewelry designer from Soho named Charlotte sat down next to me. And she looked across the coffee table and she said, so, why'd you have to become a monk? Right? Isn't it enough just to be a good person? And really, she couldn't have picked a worse moment to ask me that question. But as sometimes happens, the Holy Spirit stepped in on my behalf. And I looked at her and I thought about her question, and I took my little hors d'oeuvre and I flicked it across the room, and I took my beautiful drink and I set it down on the table, and I looked at her and I said, you know what? No, it's not. It is not enough just to be a good person, right? Because what's the alternative? To be a bad person. And no one's called to be a bad person, right? Being a good person is the minimum. I want to be a saint, right? I want to give and give and give till it hurts, right? And then I went off to the bathroom and I cried. But my point was that the Christian life, though it's focused on humility and meekness and lowliness, and though the novice is expected to seek out humiliations, nonetheless, this shouldn't be confused with mediocrity, right? So the monastic life, our vow of conversion, is an attempt to turn the cloister into an opportunity to expand, to grow. And that's my prayer for you this Easter season, is that your newly found cloister will help to broaden your heart to accept more and more grace for Christ to dwell in. God bless. See you tomorrow.